Welcome to West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church, a spiritual community whose hope is audacious and whose vision for a more equitable and just world is for all. I'm Brian Gardner, Worship Associate, and joining me today are Dave Blazer, our Music Director, Warren Campbell-Gaston, member of our Justice Visioning Task Force, Michael Hockman, Bob Beamer, and Danny Dunchak, who are our tech team, enabling folks beyond these walls to be a part of our service today. A special welcome to our guest speaker this morning, Cara Mia. Cara is a practicing witch and pagan living on Erie, Seneca land, now called Cleveland, Ohio. They have been making videos about modern paganism and witchcraft on YouTube since 2008 under the username CuteWitch772, and also co-founded The Pagan Perspective, a collaborative channel featuring pagans from various paths and backgrounds in 2009. That can be found under the YouTube name Pagan Perspective. Cara is part of the Reclaiming Tradition of Witchcraft, an inclusive, feminist, and anti-racist tradition bridging the worlds of spirituality and social justice. She also enjoys educating the public at the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic, located in Cleveland's Old Brooklyn neighborhood. A warm West Shore welcome to you, Cara. Welcome, everyone, to this community of worship. There are so many joys in the world, and there's also so much suffering. So many conflicts and not enough compassion. May our worship hour be one that magnifies our joys and brings to each of us the healing and hope that we may be needing today. A special welcome to you if you are a newcomer to our community. You are welcome here in your full self, gay, straight, cisgender, transgender, your race, your ethnicity. Whether you are here in the sanctuary or watching at home, you are welcome. Remember that a part of this welcome is doing things to ensure the safety of our neighbors, so please wear your mask and keep it on throughout the entirety of the service. We are a busy congregation intent on creating, as the beloved John Lewis would say, good trouble. So please be sure to read our weekly e-news for the latest news and events of note to stay updated. I would like to spotlight one opportunity to serve the cause of justice in our community. Greater Cleveland Congregations is conducting a virtual action event this upcoming Thursday that features both Cleveland mayoral candidates. From home, via Zoom, you can help to seek commitments from these candidates to address issues of mental health, gun control, affordable housing, and voter suppression. This is good trouble. Find out more details in your weekly e-news. Additionally, there are several activities coming up which are going to be great for the entire family. On October 10th, there's a fun way for families to get together and give back to the community. People of all ages are invited to Urban Hope's Children's Garden to learn more about it and to also offer some much-needed fall cleanup help. This program will be completely outdoors. Another great opportunity for kids to give back to the community is through Urban Hope's lunch-making initiative on October 17th. Come learn about Urban Hope and help prepare bagged lunches that are given to those in need. Bag assembly will happen at church outdoors, weather permitting. Even our youngest UUs can help on that. And finally, there is Trunk or Treat to look forward to on Friday, October 22nd. Grab your costume and join families from West Shore Church and the Child Care Center for some safe, spooktacular fun, including music, photos, and treats. Volunteers will decorate their car trunks and pass out treats to ghouls and goblins of all ages. Details for all of these events, including times, how to sign up, and whom to contact for more info, are all in your weekly e-news. Check it out. And once again, welcome to this new day. Every week, we light our chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. It is a beautiful reminder that no matter how many jarring events might happen over the course of the week, the gathered community that is West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church is a source of stability and meaning that we can depend on. So now, I light our chalice with these words, written by Eric A. Heller Wagner. Blessed is the fire that burns deep in the soul. It is the flame of the human spirit, touched into being by the mystery of life. It is the fire of reason, the fire of compassion, the fire of community, the fire of justice, the fire of faith. It is the fire of love burning deep in the human heart, the divine glow in every life. Let us witness to the unity of our spirit by saying together our unison affirmation words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio su ley. Este es nuestro magnífico convenio. Vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor y ayudarnos los unos a los otros.
Is our way forward. Joy is the birthright of all.
So may it be. And now we turn to our time of greeting, where we remember that Unitarian Universalism isn't something we do alone, but it is a vision and an energy that gathers people together in community. And there we can accomplish things that could never happen if we each acted singly, separately, and apart. We are beloved community, and we greet each other now. If you are worshiping at home with us, you are invited to share the names of people you are holding in your personal thoughts and prayers this morning. You can do so by typing their names into our West Shore Facebook chat. If you are here, turn towards the choir loft and wave at the folks at home. And now, turn to one another here in the sanctuary. Greet each other from a distance with a namaste gesture or the waving of a hand. Let's greet each other now. This has been our greeting time, where we remember that we are not alone amidst the trials and turning points of life. We are held in the arms of loving community.
Break the web of life, its magnitude we sing, for we can see divinity in every living thing. A fragment of the perfect whole in cactus and in quail, as much in tiny barnacle as in the great blue whale. Of ancient dreams we are the sum, our bones link stone to star, and bind our future worlds to come with worlds that were and are. Respect the water, land, and air which gave us creatures birth. Protect the lives of all that share the glory of the earth.
In reflecting on this week's topic, I realized a connection between the pagan tradition, Unitarianism, Universalism, Unitarian Universalism, and at a personal level, my own experience growing up as a sixth-generation Mormon. Each of those has been perceived and treated as heretical. In researching the history of the word, I learned that prior to Christianity, heresies in Greek meant a choice or option, and it was primarily used to denote a school of thought or philosophy that a person chose. Christianity, however, altered the meaning to false beliefs that endanger the soul, false thoughts and ideas that depart from orthodoxia or right thinking. Pagan religions are considered heretical by many Orthodox and fundamental Christians. There is no shortage of books, pamphlets, and efforts to actively oppose and antagonize pagan practitioners and communities. Unitarianism, while Christian in origin, was a heretical belief. Universalism, likewise, was heretical. And now Unitarian Universalism, a non-creedal religion born of the merger of two heretical religions, cannot help but be heretical. And as for myself and my heretical journey, as I mentioned, I was raised as a sixth-generation Mormon. And growing up, there was a word I heard a lot. Cult. It was perhaps a more modern way of saying heretics. To choose to have a different opinion, to be a heretic, can come at great cost. Growing up, one of the things I learned about was the infamous extermination order signed by Missouri Governor Lilburn Boggs in 1838. Does anyone here have any idea what that is? Okay, that's why I'm talking about it. Now, some of the reasons for this order can be found in a manifesto that was written to the governor that had several hundred signatories, and it included a list of heresies, including claiming to hold personal communication and conversing face-to-face with God, receiving revelations direct from heaven, healing the sick by laying on hands. Here is a sentence word for word from that manifesto. They openly blaspheme the Most High God and cast contempt on his holy religion. Now, interestingly enough, this manifesto also complains of this next sentence, which perhaps may have been the greatest of heresies for those signatories in Jackson County, Missouri in 1838. Quote, "They have been tampering with our slaves and endeavoring to sow dissensions and raise seditions amongst them," unquote. The executive order that Governor Boggs signed included this sentence: "The Mormons must be treated as enemies and must be exterminated or driven from the state, if necessary, for the public peace. Their outrages are beyond all description." And those were not idle words. 3 days later, a Missouri militia killed 17 Mormons at what would become known as Haun's Mill Massacre, which included among the dead 7-year-old Alma Smith and 10-year-old Sardius Smith. And for those interested in history and odd historical facts, that extermination order was not officially rescinded until June 25th, 1976. So, as a child, I was taught, perhaps traumatically so, the history of the price paid by those early Mormons. But then, I also came to know the price of heresy when I became a heretic to the faith of 6 generations of my family. And heresy is deeper and much more emotionally raw than mere disagreement, because it deals with foundational concepts where orthodoxy says, this is truth and there is no room for debate or disagreement. And I'm talking about exponentially more emotionally volatile than, Cleveland Browns versus Pittsburgh Steelers. These are the sorts of disagreements that can lead to disownership or death. And I look at U.S. society today, and I see deep, visceral, and raw emotions when race is included as a necessary lens for understanding the history, social, and governmental systems of this country. The results of that approach, they violate foundational orthodoxies of white innocence and American exceptionalism, among others. And I find little difference between angry parents shouting, "No CRT," at school board meetings, with those who once shouted heresy or blasphemy at those who came before us in our religious traditions. Contradicting foundational concepts brings out raw and deep feelings. If, in the pursuit of justice, we are seen as heretics to the orthodoxies of white supremacy, then I will gladly be a heretic. If it is heresy to say that Black lives matter, or that our transgender brother and sisters exist, along with our non-binary, intersex, asexual, bisexual, gay, and lesbian cousins, and that not only do they exist, but that they all deserve the full birthright of joy and dignity owed to all. If that makes me a heretic, then let me be a heretic, a happy heretic. I wanted to thank you, West Shore, for being a church and a community that is willing to learn, grow, and evolve. I say that because I have learned and grown and evolved alongside this community. May we all continue in our heresies, be aware of our orthodoxies, and always be willing to listen and learn.
Thank you, Brian. My fellow heretics, this year, West Shore celebrates its 75th year of being a liberal religious presence on the west side of Cleveland. An anniversary is a good time for us to renew our sense of who we are and who we want to be in the future. As Reverend McCarr pointed out in his sermon on the 19th of September, looking back, looking ahead, we have had a heart for justice since the very foundation of this congregation. Our UU spirituality teaches us that being our personal best, our individual best, requires our participation in creating our collective best, our public best, each of us working for an equal, fair, and just society, which, as Brian pointed out a moment ago, in some eyes might make us look like heretics, of which we can be very proud. Our congregational history is a record of ways in which West Shore has been involved in social justice work. Over and over again, we have seen a need. We have educated ourselves about that need, and we have made choices to do acts of charity and acts of advocacy. Now, sometimes the work we wanted to do was so large that the foundation we built to support it was way too small. And so we've had to learn that justice work is very difficult, requiring at its heart the building of beloved community, because we need to stand together. We need to care for ourselves, care for our lives that we share. Justice work requires us to learn and to listen to each other, to speak our personal truth and listen to that truth from other people as we move toward a consensus of what it means for us to do something useful in our society. A big part of this work is conversation, which we here call sacred conversation, talking to each other about matters that matter to UUs. Justice work is not a once-and-done deal. It is an ongoing process as we participate in an ever-shifting and challenging world. The last Saturday of this month, October 30th, your Justice Visioning Task Force is offering another opportunity for a sacred conversation. We are holding a World Cafe, a format that has worked well for us in the past. But at this World Cafe, we are going to sit informally at tables of 4 and talk to each other about what justice work means to us as individuals and as a congregation. What can we do together? And what do we need from West Shore to support what we do individually? Our financial contribution to West Shore does not just provide these 4 walls and roof and a paid professional staff, as important as those are, but we get each other. I'll tell you, it's wonderful to be in the presence of other UUs. I think we had the service on the lawn back in June. It was the last time I was surrounded by this many fellow Unitarians. It really feels good. But we get each other. We get people who share our values, people who share our hopes for the future of our communities, our nation, and our world. There are too many people who do not share our values, who want to build a world we would not want to live in. And so our UU faith calls us to create a truthful, just, and equitable world. And as we spend our money and our energy, let us put it toward that good work. Our offering will now be gratefully received.
Thank you, Dave. That was beautiful. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Warren. Good morning. Our meditation is actually in the hymnal. It's number 517. It happens to be an invocation that is used in my tradition. It's called The Charge of the Star Goddess, and it is a portion of a larger poem or piece of liturgy known as The Charge of the Goddess, originally written by Doreen Valiente. The adaptation in the hymnal is by Starhawk, who was one of the founders of the tradition of witchcraft of which I am a part, the reclaiming tradition. So I thought this would be perfect for today. It is written as though it could be responsive, but I will just read it for you today. It is written as though the goddess is speaking to her children, her followers. I, who am the beauty of the green earth and the white moon among the stars and the mysteries of the waters, I call upon your soul to arise and come unto me. For I am the soul of nature that gives life to the universe. From me all things proceed, and unto me they must return. Let my worship be in the heart that rejoices, for behold, all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals. Let there be beauty and strength, power and compassion, honor and humility, mirth and reverence within you. And you who seek to know me, know that your seeking and yearning will avail you not unless you know the mystery. For if that which you seek you cannot find within yourself, you will never find it without. For behold, I have been with you from the beginning, and I am that which is attained at the end of desire. Thank you for having me here at West Shore this morning. I'm very excited to be here and add another wonderful UU community to my list of contacts in the UU world. So I'm very excited to be here. Today, we are talking about paganism. This is a big word. I'm actually going to time myself as I always do, so before I forget, let me start that. Paganism is a term that refers to a variety of religions and spiritual paths. I could literally go on for hours talking about the many different things that fall under this category and the nuances among them. In fact, I do often. But we don't have time for that today. Today, I want to talk about paganism in a general way, an overview, if you will. The way I describe my personal religious and spiritual path can also get much more specific with more words and more detail. But the simplest way I identify my path is to say that I am a pagan witch. So let's focus on the first half of that today. When we characterize pagan paths in an attempt to differentiate them from others, we might focus on a few things. Religious studies scholar and researcher Ethan Doyle White has described pagan paths as follows: a collection of modern religious, spiritual, and magical traditions that are inspired by the pre-Judaic, pre-Christian, and pre-Islamic belief systems of Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. So that was a lot of components. Breaking that down to a few adjectives, we could describe paganism as being typically pre-Christian, nature-based, polytheistic of some form, and Eurocentric. Native American and other indigenous belief systems are often nature-based, rooted in the land, in direct relationship to it, but they are not considered pagan. So as one example, each of these characteristics alone is not enough to define it. It is the combination of all of these different descriptors. As another example, belief systems from the Americas, from sub-Saharan Africa, from the Far East, and so on, may be polytheistic. Many of them are. They are also often pre-Christian, pre-Judaic, pre-Islamic, but they are not categorized within paganism typically. So we're focusing on those Eurocentric, polytheistic, nature-based paths. Just to keep it simple, right? Yeah. So, scholars also tend to use a lowercase p when discussing ancient belief systems and practices. So lowercase p, pagan, refers to the old pre-Christian systems. And a capital P is often used when referring to the modern paths and religious movements that are inspired by those older views. So now that we know a little bit about where and when, let's talk about how. What do modern pagans believe? This is a big question. Bear with me. Two people, a little over a decade ago now, two researchers, a married couple, Joyce and River Higginbotham, did some research and interviewed a bunch of their pagan peers. They came up with a list of 7 principles. Just so happens to be the same amount that Unitarian Universalism has. They came up with 7 principles of pagan belief that most pagans mostly agree with. That's about as best as we can do. Again, this is because as a wide variety of paths, there is a wide variety of individual beliefs about, well, anything. I find their list to be a helpful starting point for discussion, however, even though it's far from the whole picture. So here are those 7 principles. 1, we are responsible for the beliefs we choose to adopt. 2, we are responsible for our actions and personal development. 3, we are responsible for deciding who or what deity is for us and for developing a relationship with that deity. I like to add here, if applicable. 4, everything contains the spark of intelligence. 5, everything is sacred. 6, this one gets a bit wordy. Each part of the universe can communicate with each other part, and they often cooperate for specific ends. And this is one way that the Higginbothams chose to describe magic. There are many other definitions of that, usually with fewer words. And the 7th principle they came up with that, again, most pagans mostly agree with, is that consciousness survives death. So, when we look at those first 3, they focused a lot on responsibility. We are responsible for this, that, and the other. Personal responsibility and authority are a big focus in paganism and witchcraft, in my experience. We have no institutional authority telling us what or how to believe or practice. We have no holy book with answers that apply universally to all of us. There are no gods universal to all pagans. Each pagan may honor different gods. Some pagans don't believe in gods at all. There is no, the devil made me do it. There is also no, the goddess made me do it. We are each ultimately responsible for our own beliefs, practices, actions, behaviors, and so on. The next 2 principles somewhat touched on views like animism and pantheism, which many pagans also identify with. As always, there is more nuance, but to put them very simply, animism describes a belief that everything has spirit, is animate, is alive. Not just humans and other animals, but rocks, trees, rivers, mountains, cars, buildings, everything. Pantheism, similar but not the same, is the belief that there is no separation between divinity and the world, that the universe, here referring to the entirety of everything in existence, is divine, and divinity is manifest in all things, immanent throughout all things, places, beings. The next principle on the list is the way that those 2 decided to describe magic, or to attempt to, emphasizing the belief in interconnectedness of all things. Everything in the universe, again referring to everything in existence, which may in fact be multiverses, we don't know. Everything is connected to everything else, and we tune into and manipulate those connections to cause change. And that's magic. A ripple in a pond, or a fly landing on a web, causing a vibration that alerts the spider to its presence. We are all a part of that interconnected web, and what affects one part affects us all. When I have asked my fellow pagans over the years about these 7 principles, do you also mostly agree with most of these things? That 7th principle is the one that people are the most uncertain about. Consciousness survives death. And this makes sense because none of us can know for certain. Many pagans do believe in some form of reincarnation, though the specific details vary depending on who you ask. Some believe in various forms of afterlife, some do not. But another significant belief that this principle brings up for me, as far as what I consider characteristically pagan, is not only that there are as many different answers as there are pagans, but that usually we are okay with not knowing for sure. We do not believe there is only one right answer. We do not all think alike to walk together. If you're realizing some similarities here between paganism and Unitarian Universalism, you're not wrong. Earth-based practices are one of the sources that inspire Unitarian Universalism and its theology. And I've met at least one pagan at every UU church I've ever visited. Pagans don't have churches as such, usually. Many do not even have like-minded friends or groups to study and practice paganism with. So I have often recommended that pagans having trouble finding community seek out UU churches. Some people just want a community centered on spirituality, where they can have their own religious views and have those views be accepted, even embraced. Others may have children and find the religious education programs that expose young people to all kinds of world religions and their beliefs to be invaluable. Areas with strong, active pagan communities may have that kind of support and togetherness, those kinds of resources themselves. But many pagans do not have that option for some or all of their time on this path. I learned and practiced alone, in my room, reading books and websites for years. But I was a teenager, too young to seek out adult-run groups anyway. In college, I was still a solitary, a witch working alone without a formalized group. But I had started making videos on YouTube by then, and now I had online friends from all over the country and all around the world who I could learn from and share with. Toward the end of college, when I was a senior, an incoming freshman started a UU student group on campus. I began attending. My time there encouraged me to attend UU services after college. It was at a UU church that I first met some pagans who I then practiced with, very informally and not very regularly, but for a short amount of time. I also started attending public pagan pride events in college because by then I could drive myself to them and I was a little bit older, so I was able to take part in adults-only events and things because, of course, for legal reasons in many ways, because there is still so much discrimination and prejudice against pagan faiths, it is difficult to include minors if they are not the children of members of these groups. So as a minor, I knew that that was not an option to me. I pursued it after I was able to. Now, several years later, pagan and witch community plays a much stronger role in my life and practice, but I started alone. So, lots of pagans go without any form of community for a lot of the time. There is such a wide variety of beliefs that you never really know who believes like you do until you ask them. It's hard to find places to practice since we don't have churches. There's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of unknowns. In some places, prejudice and discrimination are still a daily struggle and a reality. At this point, you might be thinking, why on earth would somebody choose to be pagan? Well, maybe some people like a challenge. But mostly, a lot of us feel like we didn't choose. This is just who we always were. But we didn't always know there was a word for it. The word pagan was initially used as an insult against those who had not yet converted to the new religion of Christianity. Heathen, similarly, was an insult. So was witch. So was queer. So was heretic. Many words that were once insults have been reclaimed by those who were intended to be the targets, who said, no, that word isn't as bad as you think. We are not who you think. In many ways, modern pagans are trying to reclaim what we see as the beliefs and practices of our ancestors before conversion was forced upon them. We are inspired by art, music, poetry, folklore, and myth, thinking of these as the ways that their beliefs were passed on. Some pagans seek to reconstruct historical societies' practices as closely as possible with the evidence available to us. Most of the pagans and witches I know, however, merely view the pre-Christian past as inspiration, perhaps motivation, but we are consciously creating new practices that are suitable for who we are today. Our views evolve and grow and change with time, and so do our practices. These are living traditions. Inclusivity is an important factor to so many of my peers today. Things like using gender-inclusive language when talking about one another, but also when talking about our gods, if applicable. And taking care to research our source material to prevent cultural appropriation are not things that most of the pagan demographic were as concerned with decades ago, let alone centuries or millennia ago, when the word pagan didn't even exist to describe those beliefs and practices at that time. Some practitioners absolutely were concerned with this decades ago, but it's taken this long for a lot of us to hear and pay attention. And there are still many who are unaware or unsympathetic. Still, paganism in general seems to have been, since the 60s and 70s at least, associated with being more accepting of various sexual and gender identities. Our movement has been influenced by environmentalism, feminism, the civil rights movement. Some people learn about paganism and are drawn to it because something about them or their beliefs is not accepted in the belief system in which they were raised. For me at first, it was things like being a young woman, being intrigued by the idea of a goddess. Then when I discovered I was not heterosexual, it was the disapproval of my Christian family and friends and the welcoming acceptance of pagan views I was already learning about that made me continue to feel comfortable on this path. I, like many others in this country at least, I don't know about elsewhere, learned about mythology in school. My classes focused on Greek and Roman mythology, but I also had a special interest class that focused on Egyptian myth and culture. I was inspired by the idea of more than one deity, deities with different areas of specialty who ruled over different aspects of life. This made sense to me in a way that I hadn't considered before. I loved stories, and I loved theater, which I went on to get a degree in, and so much of early theater was telling the stories of the gods. Ritual theater is also used today in many ways, acting out the seasonal observances or stories from myth related to the time being celebrated. The celebrations of paganism too called to me because they are connected sometimes to the lives of those various deities, but also to natural cycles. The sun, the moon, planets, and stars have an effect on when and how we celebrate. We consider those observances and the practice of tuning into those cycles integral to our path, many of us. The most common holidays connected to the seasons and points throughout the year, solstices, equinoxes, and so on, were popularized by one modern pagan religion, Wicca. But today, the lines are more unclear as to who will tend to celebrate what. Not all pagans observe the same holidays, but today, not only Wiccans celebrate those most popular ones, many non-Wiccan pagans do as well. Some of this blurring seems to be because, as minority religions, groups of people who are doing the exact same thing as you are very hard to find, and if you do find them, they're very small. So when people would come together in larger groups for community, such as at pagan pride events, beliefs and practices were shared so that common ground could be found on which to base a ritual that would speak to everyone in attendance. Over time, some of these things came to be thought of as more generically pagan, rather than belonging to any specific modern pagan religion where it may have actually originated. Some people, too, feeling a connection with more than one of those specific paths within the larger category, started calling themselves just pagan. Not only did this simplify things as far as having fewer words to say to describe yourself to others, but it also felt like a way to identify with that larger group. Pagan pride events and similar maybe began to feel like family reunions, where all of your distant relations would gather together. Maybe you don't know them all. Maybe you don't like them all. You certainly know that you were not all doing the exact same thing when you returned home in your respective personal practices or your personal lives. But there was something about knowing we're all pagan that created a wider sense of connection, especially when facing legal issues, discrimination, prejudice. Having those larger numbers as a more broad demographic was useful and probably felt incredibly important. Not everyone liked this movement toward generic pagan identity because it can sometimes seem to, or actually, erase the more nuanced reality of individual paths. Some people also just don't like the term for various reasons, just like some people don't like the word witch. It's important to remember that self-identification is a factor here. I don't think self-identification is all there is to it. People can call themselves all kinds of things that might not actually describe them because there's no regulation of things like this, but it is one component. Some people might fall under the category of pagan by some definitions, but would not claim that name for themselves. And we do want to respect people's autonomy and personal authority over their own path by not forcing a label on them that they don't want. This goes back to how some world religions may be nature-based or polytheistic or pre-Christian, but that doesn't automatically make them pagan, quote unquote. To me, being a pagan is all of these things. It is a reverence for nature, inspiration from older ways, diverse and varied views on the nature of divinity, belief in magic, progress and evolution and inclusion. It is an expansive feeling of connection with all things and a deep frustration at those members of my extended spiritual family whose views and actions in this society do not seem to align with their professed beliefs the way I think they should. It is knowing that part of the deal is that we don't all have to agree on everything. So someone else's identification with the term or their choice not to identify with it does not negate my own choice either way. I am responsible for myself and my beliefs. No one else is responsible for what I believe, and I'm not responsible for what anyone else chooses to believe. It's being part of a minority religious group, and it is being part of community, local and on a global scale, both of which continue to get bigger every day, and holding both of those truths in paradox. It is constantly learning, and at least for me personally, it is teaching and passing on what I know. It is all those things and more, which is difficult or impossible to put into words at this time. Not because so much of these paths cannot be shared in words, not because it isn't allowed, but because words cannot do it justice or explain it in ways that can be understood by words alone. These things must be experienced. To follow a pagan path, you must choose to do so and follow it where it leads you. You will learn to say no when the path in front of you is not yours, but instead someone else's. And you will learn to say yes when the path is yours, even if at first you didn't recognize it or actively tried to avoid it. You may even learn to say, well, here we go, when the path looks rougher than you wanted, but it is yours, and it is leading where you need or want to go. You are responsible for your journey, Whether you say yes, no, or, well, here we go. You are always on your path. And I hope you enjoy the journey. Safe travels. Thank you.
Our world is one world. What touches one affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. Our world is one world. The thoughts we think affect us all. The way we build our attitudes with love or hate, we make a bridge or wall. Our world is one world. Its ways of wealth affect us all. The way we spend, the way we share, who are the rich or poor, who stand or fall. Our world is one world, just like a ship that bears us all, where fear and greed make many holes, but where our hearts can hear a different call.
Brian and I are doing this one as a team because I love the Chalice Extinguishing that you always use, because it's very similar to what we often say when we open circle after ritual in my tradition. So, the usual one.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again.
And when we open circle, we might say, the circle is open but never broken. May the peace of the gods and the universe go with us in our hearts. Merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. A reminder that today's sermon chat will be via Zoom at 12:30 a.m. I will see you there. And now, by way of benediction, I would like to share a blessing that was written by Scott Cunningham, who is another well-known early Wiccan author. If I can remember where it begins. I usually sing it, but I'm going to recite it, so I have to think of it in words, not song. I have it written down in case of this happening. You know when someone asks you for your address or your phone number or something else that you have memorized and in the moment it's gone? Here we go. May the powers of the One, source of all creation, all-pervasive, omnipotent, eternal, may the goddess, the lady of the moon, and the god, horned hunter of the sun, may the powers of the spirits of the stones, rulers of the elemental realms, may the powers of the stars above and the earth below bless this place and this time and I who am with you. Blessed be.
And amen.